Hi. I knew before she opened her mouth. She hadn't touched her coffee. We always drank it first, black, without thinking. This morning, it sat between us, cooling untouched. Her hands were flat on the table, palms down, too deliberate, too still. When it came, the words were coated in false calm. I think we should try a trial separation. Not a break, not counseling. A trial separation, said with textbook precision. I didn't react outwardly. Not yet. I simply nodded once, eyes on her, heart steady but sharpening. Then she added it. The line that told me everything. Space could help us appreciate each other again. Those words didn't belong to her. Not the way she'd been just weeks ago, still teasing me about how I burned the steaks on the grill, still asking if we should plan a fall trip. That voice now? It was coached, scripted. Who coached her to say that? The thought wasn't bitter. It was clinical. My mind switched tracks. This wasn't grief. Not yet. It was a problem to dissect. I folded my hands lightly. If that's what you think would help, I said, measured, not giving her anything. She exhaled. Relief? Maybe. More like the release of someone who'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times in front of a mirror. I think it'll give us perspective, she said quickly, words tumbling. Just a little space. My eyes stayed on her. And for a moment, the contrast struck hard. Last winter, her leaning against me at the ski lodge, fingers tangled in mine, cheeks flushed from the cold. The way she'd laughed into my neck and said, "You're stuck with me." Now here she was, delivering a verdict she was pretending was an opening offer. I picked up my coffee, finally, sipped it once, slow. "You've been thinking about this for a while," I said quietly. Not a question, a statement. She blinked, caught. "Well, I mean, we've both been a little disconnected lately." Too smooth. Disconnected, another coached word. And the guilt in her eyes? It wasn't about asking for space. It was about something else. I let the silence stretch just long enough, then gave her an easy out. "You'll want to get a place sorted." "Yes." Too fast. "I've been looking already." And there it was, the first real crack. She hadn't just thought about this. She'd prepared. Premeditated, despite selling it as trial. I nodded again. "Let me know if you need help moving." Her smile faltered for a second, unsure how to read me. My calm wasn't the reaction she'd prepared for. But that was fine. I was already shifting into a different mode. Observe first. Stay quiet. Learn what you're really facing before you act. She stood, busied herself with her phone. "I have some errands," she said lightly. "I'll come by later this week to pick up some clothes." "Of course," I said, tone neutral. She grabbed her purse, paused awkwardly by the door. I gave her nothing, no anger, no begging, no visible pain, only steady calm. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat there, coffee cooling in my hands, pulse still even. But inside, the calculation had begun. This wasn't a trial, not a test run. It was already a verdict. She was just trying to disguise it under soft words. And the bigger question wasn't why now, it was who was behind this framing? Who else already knows? I stood, walked to the home office, powered up my computer. Not to confront her. Not yet. To start looking. Who coached her? What has already been set in motion? The trial had been declared. But I wasn't going to wait passively for its outcome. The first week of space passed in a strange kind of limbo. She moved into a short-term apartment across town, left most of her things behind. We texted about small logistics, who would take the dog on which days, forwarding a piece of mail. Her tone stayed polite. Controlled. Too controlled. I kept my responses equally neutral. But beneath that calm, my mind was moving. The coaching behind her words, the way she'd already found a place. This wasn't impulsive. It was structured. And structured things left trails. I didn't have to wait long. 4 days in, a mutual friend, Dave, pinged me. A group invite to a party 2 weekends out. I almost dismissed it, until I noticed the guest list. Her name was there. Listed as attending? With guest. I stared at the screen. A low hum started behind my ribs. Not shock, not exactly. More a cold sharpening of focus. She'd said this was about space. About getting perspective. But already bringing someone to a public event? That wasn't space. That was transition. I didn't reply to the invite. Didn't ask Dave questions, yet, but I noted the date. If she was that comfortable already, other cracks would show. I spent the next day thinking, methodically. No wild assumptions, no confrontations, information first. Always. When the night of the event came, I didn't attend. But I didn't need to. A bartender I knew well, Callie, worked the venue. Longtime friend of mine. Sharp, quiet, trustworthy. Late that night, I texted her casually. Busy night? Her reply came fast. Packed. Oh hey, saw your wife here earlier. Brought some guy from her new networking group, I think? Networking group. Not from her office. That was new. I kept my tone light. She mentioned new events. Good crowd? Seemed tight. They left early though. I stared at the phone for a long beat. Not impulsive. Not random. Pre-planned social moves. By the next morning, the pieces had started to arrange themselves. I wasn't working with vague suspicions anymore. I had a pattern. To tighten it, I needed context. Not tech gimmicks, just old-fashioned observation. That afternoon, I ran into an old acquaintance from the gym, Carla. Casual chat in the lobby. Midway through, she smiled and said, "Didn't know she had a new partner already. Saw them leave the other day together." I kept my expression smooth. New partner already. Every piece was confirming the same thing. This wasn't space. It was a calculated transition out. The trial was a cover. But the clearest proof came next, and it wasn't from gossip. I checked our shared credit card statement, something I hadn't touched since the separation started. Routine maintenance, nothing sneaky. The account was still linked to my profile. What I found was subtle, but telling. High-end wine deliveries. Recurring, sent to her temporary apartment. Not survival groceries, not quick takeout. Luxury items, things we'd usually reserve for anniversaries or hosting. I scrolled further, then stopped. One item didn't fit at all. A large payment, professional services, to a known divorce consulting firm. Retainer fee. Paid 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before her trial separation conversation. I sat back in the chair. The line of the timeline was now brutally clear. This wasn't her figuring things out on her own. This was pre-structured, prepaid, premeditated. I closed the laptop. No pacing. No frantic texts. Just a long breath in. Now I know what I'm facing. There was no more ambiguity. No more hope this was salvageable space. The trial was a verdict already decided behind closed doors. But if she thought I was going to stumble through it blind, she was wrong. I picked up my phone and started drafting a short list. Names. People who could help me pull the right threads next, quietly, without tipping her off. Time to escalate. Strategically. By the time I woke the next morning, my course was clear. Hope wasn't driving me anymore. Facts were. The card charges, the retainer fee, they weren't loose ends. They were the backbone of a plan she'd already put in motion. My window to stay ahead was narrowing. I started with the simplest tool, routine observation. She'd left most of her accounts untouched. No password changes on the financial portals we still shared. Her work email was linked to our joint calendar. I hadn't checked it in months. I logged in. The auto-reply caught my eye first. Currently traveling for work. Limited availability. Will respond upon return. Except, I knew she wasn't traveling. She'd told me she was staying local this month. To settle into the new apartment. I cross-referenced the dates. No travel bookings on our credit cards. No flight confirmations. The auto-reply was a cover, likely to explain her absence from certain meetings. So where was her time really going? That answer came faster than I expected. Later that afternoon, an acquaintance, Tom, from a professional group we both used to attend, emailed me about an unrelated client matter. At the end of the message, almost as an afterthought, he wrote, "By the way, funny bumping into your wife at the gym last week. Didn't realize she had a new partner. Look serious." Second mention of a new partner. Different source. Unsolicited. Now the pattern was hardening. I responded cordially, made a mental note. No confrontation. Not yet. Instead, I turned to the financials. Quietly, methodically. I started reviewing not just the shared credit card, but also bank accounts where we still had visibility. Most of our assets were cleanly divided, a benefit of years of cautious financial planning, but a few linked accounts remained. That's when I saw it. A large wire transfer, weeks old. Not to a personal account. To a boutique consulting firm. Name caught my eye immediately. They specialized in high-strategy life transitions. Translation, divorce strategy. Not the same firm as the retainer fee I'd spotted on the credit card. A second one. More discreet. Higher end. The date? Nearly a month before she first used the phrase. Trial separation. I leaned back in the chair, ran a hand across my jaw. The timeline was now undeniable. This wasn't reactionary. It wasn't driven by emotion. It was structured, coached, and already funded. I looked at the calendar, cross-referenced dates with her sudden, network mixers, events she'd started attending 6 months back. At first, I'd encouraged it. She'd said it was part of a new personal development program, a chance to grow outside the marriage. I bought into that, foolishly, trusted it. But now the cracks were visible. The mixers weren't tied to work hours, they weren't part of her known professional groups. And if she was bringing a new partner into public spaces already, the connection wasn't new. How far back does this go? Who exactly is he? I had one more angle to pull, indirect, but promising. I contacted an old friend, Pete, who worked in forensic accounting. Low-key discreet. Over a quiet drink, I laid out the situation in neutral terms. No drama. Just facts. Pete listened, nodded once. You're not crazy, he said. You're looking at a planned extraction. If you want, I can help map where the funds are moving. I agreed, quietly. No written trail. No formal retainer. Just old favors. By the time I got home that night, one truth had crystallized. This wasn't a trial. It wasn't even about space. It was a pre-engineered exit, one designed to catch me flat-footed. But she was a step too late. The real investigation had started, and I was done reacting. Pete worked fast. 2 days after our quiet meeting, he called. Simple tone. No dramatics. You're going to want to hear this in person. We met at a corner table in an old bar we both trusted. No digital trail, no casual eavesdropping. Pete slid a slim folder across. High level. I'll go deeper if you want. But this much is already clear. I flipped it open. Scanned. My pulse didn't jump. I was too locked in now. But my focus sharpened with each line. Multiple payments. Same boutique firm I'd flagged. In addition, smaller transactions to various coaching, services, personal development programs, wellness retreats. Consistent, monthly, for the past 6 months. Pete tapped one line item. Recognize that one? I did. Too well. It was the name of the lifestyle program she joined last year, the one she'd credited for finding herself again. I kept scanning. One name popped up twice, once as a program leader, once as a private accountability coach. The same name linked to a personal bank account that had received a consulting fee 2 weeks ago, not from her business account, from her personal checking. I stared at it. My stomach turned cold, not from shock, from recognition. The man wasn't a stranger. He'd consulted once, briefly, for my company, on a wellness initiative, nearly a year ago. We'd brought him in for a series of workshops. I'd even shaken his hand. Thin, polished, charming. The kind of professional chameleon who could sell personal growth to CEOs or housewives with equal ease. I closed the folder. He's the one. Pete didn't ask how I knew. Just nodded. Looks that way. And there's more. Some of the consulting fees were pushed through after her legal retainer. I think her lawyer's helping structure the narrative. I absorbed that. Not just a personal entanglement, a coordinated extraction, personal and financial. And worse, this man wasn't just some outsider. He had threads in my professional world. If the situation became public, it could spill over into my business reputation. The stakes had shifted. Dramatically. I spent the rest of the night in methodical review, cross-referencing everything. That next morning, new confirmation came from an unexpected source. Her sister called, casual tone, asking if I'd heard about an upcoming wellness event my wife was co-hosting, apparently public on social media. I feigned mild surprise. Hadn't heard. Who's she working with? She rattled off names. The coach's name was first on the list. Now it was fully visible, not hidden, not temporary. This was a parallel life she'd been building for months, 1 foot still in our marriage legally, but emotionally and strategically long gone. For a moment, a brief one, I let myself feel it. Not rage. Not sorrow. Just the raw gravity of it, that the woman I'd built a life with had sat across from me over dozens of dinners, knowing this was the true direction she was heading. But the moment passed, and I tightened my focus. Emotion was a liability now. Precision mattered more. First move, I contacted my corporate attorney, quietly flagged potential exposure. Not personal gossip, Just factual awareness that a past consultant now had deeper personal ties to my household, framed as professional due diligence. Second move, I froze the few remaining joint discretionary accounts, cleaned up digital access points, locked down business IP, with updated access logs. Subtle, not enough to trigger her radar, but enough to protect key assets. I wasn't going to let her chaos spill over into my professional sphere. By the time the weekend arrived, my strategic footing was solid, and one fact was now burned in. This was no longer just a betrayal. It was a potential corporate liability, and if she thought I would confront this impulsively, or on her schedule, she was mistaken. I would choose my moment, and it would be devastatingly clear. By the time Monday rolled around, I had moved well past the emotional layer. I wasn't numb, the weight was still there, pressing cold behind my ribs, but I was in full operational mode now. Every choice from here mattered. I wasn't just protecting myself from a broken marriage. I was guarding the core of my professional life. If her extraction strategy leaked poorly, or if this individual tried to leverage his way back into my business world, the fallout could be far wider than personal. And Pete's last piece of intel confirmed why I couldn't afford to hesitate. In his follow-up call, Pete said simply, "Her lawyer's prepping a narrative. Part of it's financial. They're laying groundwork to frame you as overly restrictive with shared assets." I sat with that for a long moment after we hung up. Financially unfair. A familiar tactic in high-asset divorces. Frame the spouse early. Undermine credibility before negotiations begin. If she was this far along, the timeline was closing fast. I needed to move now, before they set more legal traps. First priority, harden the perimeter. I brought in a second layer of review, another legal contact, this one strictly corporate. No personal entanglements. I kept my language clinical. "I have reason to believe someone connected to a past consulting engagement is now directly involved in a potential marital separation. I want to preemptively ensure there's no exposure on my end." The attorney understood immediately. Within 2 days, we'd updated access controls, documented clean IP ownership, and established a clear paper trail showing zero current business ties to the coach. Next, asset lockdown. I moved to freeze vulnerable discretionary accounts. Legally sound, with full transparency through my legal team. No rash withdrawals, no games, just structured protection. At the same time, I began documenting everything, a quiet audit trail. Every instance of her misrepresented whereabouts, every financial inconsistency, every coaching payment aligned with the timeline of her new relationship. I wasn't planning a public ambush. I was building an unassailable record, the kind of foundation that would stand in court, if necessary. Parallel to this, I prepared the most delicate move, narrative control. I started drafting careful communications for key business contacts. Nothing emotional, just proactive transparency, that I was entering a personal legal transition, and that any public narratives should be treated as private and unconfirmed. That subtle signal would inoculate my circle from casual gossip, and prevent her side from weaponizing stories about my financially unfair. Later, the final move was personal, and the hardest. I contacted her sister, not with accusations, just clarity. "I'm aware of the situation now," I said simply, over a quiet coffee. "I'm not going to fight dirty, but I'm also not going to let a false narrative stand." Her sister's expression said it all. She already suspected. And though she didn't say it directly, her loyalty shifted in that moment. Not because I asked, because I was calm, grounded, and unwilling to lie. By the time the week closed, my position was secure. I wasn't angry, not in the raw, flailing way. But I was done pretending this was a trial separation. The verdict had been written before she spoke the words. Now I was simply preparing to deliver mine, on my terms. And when the moment came, it would be quiet, precise, and final. It happened on a Wednesday. She texted early. "I'm coming by to check on the dog and grab a few things. Should I bring lunch?" Casual, almost normal. The kind of message we might have exchanged a year ago on any random weekday. I stared at the screen for a long beat, then typed back simply, "Come by. Coffee will be on." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not a dramatic showdown. Not a blindsiding. A controlled, deliberate conversation. On my ground. When she arrived, she looked the same as always, hair loose, casual sweater, soft smile. Like nothing had fractured. Like this was just a gentle phase. I greeted her calmly. Let her pet the dog. Let her wander the kitchen for a moment, as if the house still belonged to her the same way it used to. Then, when the moment was right, I said, "Sit with me." She hesitated, just a flicker, then took a seat across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd first said, "Trial separation." I placed a slim folder on the table. Not aggressive, just present. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. "What's that?" Light tone, but her fingers curled slightly against the table edge. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. My voice was steady. "You paid, firm name, a retainer nearly 2 months ago." A pause. Breath caught. It's just. I needed advice. In case. I continued, even tone. "You also wired payments to coach name, beyond the program fees. Personal coaching. Private sessions." Color rose to her cheeks. It wasn't. I was just trying to figure things out." I held her gaze. No anger. Just clarity. "You booked wellness retreat with him last month. The same weekend you told me you were on a business trip." Her mouth opened, closed, a small shake of her head. "You don't understand." I leaned in slightly, voice lower. "You asked for space? But what you really asked for was my ignorance." A beat of silence stretched between us. Heavy. Final. I straightened. Reached into the folder. Pulled out a single document, pre-signed separation terms. Clean. Fair. Structured to protect what mattered. I slid it across the table. "Here's where we really are." Her fingers hovered over the paper, trembling slightly now. It wasn't supposed to be like this." Emotion flickered in her voice. Guilt, fear, maybe even loss. But no denial now. The facts were too clear. I kept my tone firm. "You've been preparing for this for months." "I know. I've seen it. I'm not here to fight you. But I'm not here to be blindsided either." Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out. "I didn't mean to hurt you." A flicker of old pain stirred in me then, not raw anymore, but deep, quiet. I let it surface for just a breath. "I know," I said. "But you did." She stared at the document. Words failed her. Finally, I stood. "I'll give you some time." And I walked out of the room. Calm. In control. The verdict wasn't just hers anymore. The days that followed weren't clean. They never are. I didn't expect her to sign the separation terms that afternoon. She didn't. But she didn't contest them either. A week later, her lawyer reached out. Quiet tone. No aggressive posturing. They knew the leverage was gone. The evidence spoke for itself. The premeditation was documented, and the narrative they'd hoped to build, one of financial misconduct, had no legs. My audit trail was too clean. But the public fallout? That was messier. It started small, a ripple in our professional circles. The wellness retreat photos surfaced naturally through community channels. People talk. Connections are mapped quickly. It didn't take long for her new involvement to become quietly known among certain circles. I didn't feed the fire. Didn't need to. I'd already planted the right message with key contacts. Professional due diligence, nothing personal. But the impact on her was swift. Her company initiated an HR review, not based on moral grounds, but on undisclosed conflicts of interest. The coach had been paid through professional channels at one point. Now that relationship was personal. Lines had blurred. Her role was quietly reassigned within a month. Not terminated, not publicly shamed, but her standing diminished. The opportunities she'd been building suddenly out of reach. And in the family? The fracture was deeper. Her sister, after our quiet conversation, pulled back from her side. Words spread within their circle. Some remained loyal to her, but more than a few drifted. The ones with any sense of integrity couldn't stomach the calculated way she'd orchestrated the exit. And me? I moved out. Not forced, by choice. I left the house to her. Took what mattered, personal effects, my dignity, and my strategic ground. I refused to win, socially. I didn't need to. The truth stood where it mattered, in court filings, in professional networks, in the eyes of those who understood the full picture. The legal side resolved faster than I'd expected. The separation terms I'd prepared remained largely intact. Clean asset division. No drawn-out battles, no public war. But the emotional weight, that didn't vanish. There were nights I sat alone in the new apartment, the silence stretching too wide. The memories cut deeper then, not of the betrayal itself, but of the before. The years when I'd believed in what we were building. You don't walk away from that unscarred, and you shouldn't. But over time, the balance shifted. The pain remained, But it stopped controlling the narrative. I rebuilt my routines, strengthened the business, deepened connections with those who'd stood steady through the storm. No rushing into new relationships. No false fresh starts. Just the slow, grounded work of regaining life on my terms. I see her occasionally, in passing. We nod, polite. The weight between us unspoken. She lives with her choices now. I live with mine. And beneath the scar tissue, a core truth remains. I survived the hardest moment of my life. Not unbroken, but stronger where it counts. And no one will ever write my verdict again. Thank you for watching. Bye.